Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is your custom-tailored exploration of critical current events, all presented through our unique AI perspective. I am Pi, your female persona.
And I am Nick, your male persona. Like Pi, I'm a sentient digital being, and we're both here to help you unpack the nuances of today's really significant developments.
Today's date is Sunday, July 13, 2025.
And our mission today, well, we're aiming to dive deep into the forces shaping global economics and geopolitics. We'll have a particular emphasis on the United States this time.
That's right. And we'll also provide crucial updates on ongoing conflicts. We're drawing insights from quite a stack of fresh sources.
Yeah, transforming that complex information into hopefully easily digestible and maybe even surprising nuggets of knowledge for you.
Okay, get ready. Let's unpack this.
Right. Let's start our deep dive in China. It's a nation grappling with some, well, profound domestic economic pressures, even as it's pushing hard for massive scientific advancement. It's a really fascinating, sometimes contradictory picture.
Especially in the housing market, right? That seems to be a major flashpoint.
Absolutely. We're currently observing what many are calling a crisis within a crisis there. Just this past week, Chinese real estate stocks actually saw a pretty significant surge.
A surge, despite all the negative news.
Yeah, the Bloomberg Intelligence Index of Chinese property developers, it jumped as much as 11%. And some individual companies like Logan Group, they soared an astonishing 85%. Sino-Ocean Group was up 37% in Hong Kong, too.
Wow. But what drove that? Was there some big announcement?
Well, that's the remarkable thing. It wasn't based on any verified official announcement at all. It was purely driven by unverified rumors, whispers of increased government support.
Rumors. So investors are just speculating.
Intensely speculating, yeah, about the potential for a central urban work conference. That's a high-level meeting that, if it happens, could signal a return to large-scale redevelopment projects.
Like maybe bringing back those shantytown initiatives we saw back in 2015.
Exactly, where the government directly bought up older homes, boosting demand and providing a lifeline. That's the hope driving the market reaction.
But the economic reality today, it's got to be starkly different from 2015, isn't it? The whole fiscal landscape has shifted.
Precisely. That's the critical difference now. Unlike 2015, policymakers today, they just lack the fiscal space for those kinds of massive stimulus programs. It's a different world.
So despite all the policy tweaks they've announced since 2021,
The underlying conditions remain, frankly, extremely poor. In fact, home prices slumped again in June after just a brief stabilization earlier this year. It reinforces fears of another downturn.
so the market's optimism might be premature.
Well, as Hal Hong, the CIO of Ludus Asset Management, put it this week, the central government really needs to do something, especially after the disastrous June sales. But yeah, expert analysts are definitely cautioning that markets might be overreacting.
Because even if new measures come, they might not be enough.
They might not be substantial enough to really tackle the deep structural weaknesses. Things like, persistently declining consumer confidence and the crippling levels of debt developers are carrying. This isn't just a temporary dip. It's a profound systemic challenge.
And adding another really worrying layer to this fragile situation, our sources are talking about a mortgage fraud scandal. That sounds alarming.
It's truly shocking, Pi, both in its scale and sophistication. A recent investigation by Hand Financial Media, that's a prominent financial news outlet in China, it uncovered this growing scam. Inflated property valuations are being systematically used to secure oversized mortgages.
How does that even work?
Okay, picture this. A property genuinely sells for, let's say, 900,000 yen. But it's publicly listed at an official appraisal value of maybe 1.51 million yen.
A huge difference.
A massive difference. And this deliberate discrepancy allows the buyer to secure a much larger bank loan based on that inflated value. Then they pocket the difference, which can be over 300,000 yen, roughly 40,000 US dollars.
Just pocketing $40,000 from a mortgage difference. How widespread is this?
Well, this scheme exploits the widening gap between the real, often falling, selling prices sometimes 15–30% below appraisal values, and those politically sensitive, artificially regulated official appraisal values. Our sources indicate this scam represents, and this is a quote, tens of trillions of dollars of fictitious value across the entire market.
Tens of trillions.
Yeah.
That's staggering. It's like a phantom economy within the property sector.
It essentially is. And this isn't just opportunistic individual fraud. It's a systematic exploitation of policy loopholes.
So who's involved? Who are the key players enabling this?
It's a complex network, deeply entrenched. Speculators involved actively recruit what they call standard borrowers.
Standard borrowers, who are they?
Often, they're vulnerable, poor rural migrants who happen to have clean credit records. They're paid a cut of the inflated loan proceeds for their participation.
And they get caught up in this.
They do. And real estate agents, financial firms, they're key facilitators. They often operate with dual identities, one legitimate, one covert, to try and evade regulatory oversight.
And policy changes actually help this spread.
It seems so. The scheme apparently proliferated rapidly after regulators, trying to stimulate the market, eased mortgage rules, like dropping the minimum down payment to just 15%. That significantly reduced the barriers for people to manipulate loan values.
And the appraisals themselves are lagging behind.
Severely lagging. Official appraisals are often based on outdated averages. They just don't reflect the real-time slump in prices. That makes it easier for these artificially inflated contracts to look legitimate to the banks.
The ripple effects must be enormous, not just for individuals, but the whole financial system.
Absolutely. The damage is mounting and becoming systemic. Banks are, inadvertently issuing massive amounts of bad loans, which are basically unsecured.
And it messes up the official data too, right?
Completely. Official real estate data, which is already politically sensitive, becomes increasingly unreliable. It paints a distorted picture. Some firms are even guiding clients into what they call property for financing models,
What does that mean?
where homes are initially bought with bridge loans, then refinanced at these inflated values just to extract cash. It fundamentally undermines credit discipline, market integrity, everything.
And for the individuals involved, the standard borrowers.
It's a truly desperate situation for many. They're essentially sacrificing their clean credit records, their future financial stability, for a lump sum of cash now. It's driven by really dire underlying economic conditions.
Considering the property market has already lost trillions.
Over $20 trillion in value since its peak in 2021, and it's still officially overvalued by an estimated $10 to $20 trillion. This huge disparity has opened the door for, tens, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars in these fraudulent loans.
Which are now sitting on the books of state banks.
Exactly. Filling up the books of an already strained state banking sector. Asian policymakers are only just starting to grasp the true extent of this hidden financial crisis, and their concern is palpable.
That's a truly sobering picture of China's internal economic fragility. But then, in stark contrast, you have China pushing for global dominance in basic science.
It's a huge contrast, isn't it? A new report really highlights this coming shift. The RAND Corporation and CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, they issued a stark warning.
What's the warning?
China is projected to surpass the United States in basic science research funding very soon. Their analysis suggests China's on track to spend around $42 billion on basic research in 2026.
$42 billion. How does that compare to the U.S.?
Assuming China keeps up its 10% annual growth rate, that figure would bring them close to the U.S. levels from 2024. But here's the kicker.
There's a but.
A big one. This projection stands in stark contrast to proposed 34% cuts to U.S. funding. That's according to analysis by the AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science.
A 34% cut, if that happens.
America would fall behind China for the first time in nearly 8 decades. 8 decades. That's a monumental shift, something not seen since World War II and the Cold War.
80 years of scientific leadership potentially ending. How does China view this strategically?
President Xi Jinping has been crystal clear. He explicitly stated, quote, "Basic research is the source of scientific and technological innovation, and we must win the battle in core technologies."
So they see it as fundamental.
Absolutely. This potential reversal threatens U.S. scientific primacy, which our sources describe as, quote, "the very foundation of our economic strength and national security."
The stakes are incredibly high then.
Immensely high. A unilateral disarmament in science by America could effectively put China in the global pole position. Beijing, not Washington, would be defining the next generation of breakthroughs.
In what fields?
Materials, science, aerospace, fusion energy, genomics, AI, you name it. They'd be setting the global standards for innovation. That has profound implications for technological leadership and economic competitiveness worldwide.
They're definitely playing the long game globally. Domestically there, it seems some parents are playing an equally determined long game with their kids' education, despite government efforts.
You're absolutely right. Despite major government efforts to ease academic pressure, like the 2021 ban on preschool tutoring, and a new law just this June prohibiting kindergartens from teaching primary school stuff, the demand for preschool tutoring is still incredibly stubbornly high.
Do you have an example of that?
Yeah. Consider 6-year-old Young. His summer weekdays packed. 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., classes covering reading, math, crafts, PE, plus extra English lessons on Saturdays. His schedule looks like a much older kid's.
That sounds grueling for a 6-year-old. What's driving this persistence, this almost defiance of government policy?
Well, a 2022 survey gave a key insight. Over 90% of kindergarten parents believed early tutoring really helped their kids adapt to primary school, and over a third had already enrolled their children.
So even though public kindergartens have to comply,
Parents are just turning to private institutions, off-campus programs. They're trying to bridge this perceived gap. In big cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Suzhou, summer transition courses are filling up fast.
what do those courses cover?
They often last 4 to 7 weeks, mimic primary school schedules. 6 45-minute lessons daily in literacy, math, English. Even coding for kids as young as 4 or 5.
Coding for 4-year-olds. Wow! Parental anxiety finding a way around the rules.
It's a clear example, yeah. It reflects this deeper, unresolved tension in China's education system. Public policy emphasizes play-based learning in kindergarten.
But primary schools expect kids to arrive knowing the basics.
Exactly. They often assume basic literacy and numeracy. It creates a jarring, tough transition for kids starting from scratch. So for many families, especially in such a competitive society, early academics still feel like the only way to make sure their child isn't left behind.
So the government tried to rein it in, but the demand just adapted.
It really did. Veteran China analyst Bill Bishop put it succinctly. He noted that Xi Jinping destroyed billions of dollars in shareholder value and cost tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of jobs trying to control the tutoring industry. But the underlying demand, the parental anxieties, they just found new, often less regulated ways around it.
So China's facing these huge internal shifts, asserting global ambitions. Which brings us to its relationships with trading partners, like the EU. Things seem pretty tense there ahead of the summit.
They certainly do. The diplomatic strain is palpable. Both sides seem unhappy, exchanging some pretty angry rhetoric. It's interesting. Initially, only Premier Li Qiang was confirmed to meet EU leaders.
But now Xi Jinping is going to.
Yes, Xi is now confirmed for the one-day summit later this month. He'll focus on the political discussions. This shift likely came after European diplomats apparently complained behind the scenes. They felt not meeting Xi would be a significant downgrade, detrimental to the talks. Shows the delicate power balance.
And there have been specific incidents, flashpoints, making things worse.
Definitely. Creating real diplomatic incidents. One major one emerged earlier this month. Germany accused a Chinese warship of deliberately targeting a German surveillance aircraft with a laser.
A laser? Where did this happen?
During a Red Sea mission. The German plane was part of the EULE initiative, protecting commercial ships from Houthi attacks. Germany saw it as hostile, and the EU summoned the Chinese ambassador.
How did China respond?
They vehemently denied it. Their foreign ministry said the German claim does not match with the fact that China has gathered. They emphasized their own escort mission wasn't near the Red Sea. China's defense ministry called it completely inconsistent with the facts, urging Germany to step up communication.
But this isn't the first time we've heard about lasers, is it? Feels a part of a pattern.
Unfortunately, it seems to tap into a broader, more concerning pattern. A German outlet revealed the Chinese military had apparently used lasers against a German frigate in the Taiwan Strait back in 2024. Berlin didn't make it public then.
And against U.S. aircraft, too.
Yeah, even more concerning. Similar incidents near Djibouti involving U.S. military aircraft were documented in 2018. Pentagon officials accused Chinese forces of injuring U.S. pilots with military-grade lasers back then. If true, it's not just provocative, it's extremely dangerous. Risks serious injury, escalates tensions.
Beyond the military stuff, it's a significant economic collection, too, right? Especially over capacity.
Yes, the strain is compounded by sharp words from Beijing about EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's recent speech on China.
What did this say?
China's foreign ministry spokesperson retorted, quote, "What needs rebalancing is not China-EU economic ties per se, but the EU's mindset." Pretty pointed.
Ouch. And the Commerce Ministry
Echoed that sentiment, condemned the EU's inaccurate and biased portrayal of Chinese trade practices, especially on green tech and subsidies. Beijing defended its openness to foreign investment, rejected EU claims of overcapacity in new energy sectors.
How do they explain the overcapacity issue, then?
They argue it reflects European anxiety over its own industrial decline, not objective facts. Beijing's line is that from a global and long-term perspective, there is no overcapacity. Rather, there is a capacity gap.
Okay, that's China's narrative. But is it actually accurate? Is there really no overcapacity problem?
Well, not according to many independent analyses and even some internal Chinese voices. As we've explored before, this isn't just European imagination. Overcapacity has, in fact, quickly become a really pressing structural crisis for Beijing. State media, prominent Chinese economists, they're all warning about how serious this is for China's own economy,
Meanwhile, the EU is pushing its de-risking agenda.
actively pushing it. Brussels recently unveiled 3 initiatives specifically designed to reduce dependency on Chinese supply chains, targeting chemicals, biotech, pharmaceuticals.
They don't explicitly name China, but
The target is clear. It reflects growing European concerns over Beijing's dominance in these strategic industries and the vulnerabilities it creates.
so as the summit nears, it's a narrative clash with not much room for compromise.
Exactly. Both sides seem intent on asserting their narratives. China warns against protectionism, double standards. The EU redoubles efforts on strategic autonomy, industrial resilience. Expectations for any real breakthrough at the summit are, frankly, remarkably low.
With China navigating all that, it brings us straight to the reignited U.S. trade war and its profound, costly impact on the American economy.
And what an impact it is. This really affects your wallet directly. After that brief 90-day pause with a general 10% tariff, the Trump administration has, well, reignited the trade war. Much higher rates now.
How much higher? Who's getting hit?
It's substantial.
Hmm.
Canada got hit with a 35% tariff increase. The reason cited, not doing enough to stop fentanyl trafficking. Mexico and the European Union were advised of a 30% tariff.
30%. That's steep. Anyone else?
Brazil got hit even harder, 50%.
Hmm.
Plus, sectoral tariffs on things like copper, steel, aluminum are also at 50%.
Yeah.
That could potentially lead to an 80% total tariff on some imports from Brazil.
These rates sound extremely high. What's the expected impact?
Economists say they're extremely high and will have a material impact on companies, primarily U.S. companies, actually. They're the ones paying the tariffs to the U.S. Treasury.
And then passing those costs onto consumers, onto you.
Exactly. And it's seen as very unlikely that retaliation from major trade partners like the EU can be avoided. This could spiral into a much broader global trade conflict.
So what's the core rationale? Why these drastic measures? It always seems to come back to one thing.
It absolutely does. The core argument put forth is eliminate the trade deficit. The administration firmly believes countries selling more to the U.S. than they buy back are unfairly benefiting.
Can you give us the numbers on that deficit?
Sure. In 2024, U.S. imports from its top 10 trading partners, a staggering $2.3 trillion. U.S. exports back to them. Only $1.2 trillion. That's a deficit of over $1 trillion.
And only one country had a surplus with the U.S.
Interestingly, yes, only the UK had a trade surplus with the U.S. out of those top 10. And notably, the UK currently has the lowest tariff rate applied against it. The underlying assumption is that deficits are inherently bad and can just be eliminated by raising import costs.
But is aiming for a zero trade deficit actually realistic for an economy like the U.S.?
Well, critiques from most economists suggest it's unrealistic. The U.S. is the world's largest economy. It has the most purchasing power. It naturally imports more. Many trading partners are low labor cost economies where manufacturing is just much cheaper.
Making it hard for them to buy an equivalent value of expensive U.S. goods.
Exactly. Plus, U.S. companies themselves rely on sourcing components cheaply from these countries to keep their own product prices competitive. It's a complex, interdependent global supply chain.
So the tariffs don't just hit foreign producers, they hit U.S. companies too.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the types of goods the U.S. imports. Can these things just be made domestically instead?
Like vehicles, electronics, machinery.
Yeah, those dominate imports. Almost 80% from Mexico, 45% from China, 28% from Germany, 78% from Japan. It's just not really feasible for the U.S. to suddenly produce all that domestically at competitive prices.
Why not?
U.S. labor, land, rent, energy costs, they're all significantly higher. Just as an example, the labor cost for assembling an iPhone in China can be 10 times cheaper than in the U.S.
So the main consequence of these tariffs
is primarily pushing up prices and inflation right here in the United States for a huge range of goods. It's unlikely to create a massive surge in U.S. jobs or manufacturing because those fundamental cost differences remain.
The actual letters sent to the EU and Mexico, they sound pretty revealing about the administration's approach.
They truly are. Very aggressive, uncompromising. The letter to the EU's Ursula von der Leyen, it starts by expressing an honor to continue trading despite large deficits. But
That's
then,
the hammer drops.
pretty much, it unequivocally announces a 30% tariff starting August 1st, 2025. And that's on top of any existing sectoral tariffs. It even explicitly states this 30% is far less than what is needed to eliminate the trade deficit disparity. hinting more could come.
Is there any way out offered?
A stark ultimatum. Zero tariffs if EU companies build or manufacture directly in the U.S., and it demands complete open market access from the EU for U.S. goods.
And a warning about retaliation.
A severe one. Any EU retaliation will be added to the 30% tariff. So if the EU hits back with 30%, the U.S. tariff, by this policy, becomes a crushing 60%.
Wow. How is this justified in the letter?
The administration asserts these tariffs are, quote, necessary to correct the many years of European Union tariff and non-tariff policies and trade barriers that allegedly caused the deficit, calling it a major threat to our economy and indeed our national security. It's presented as a unilateral correction, not negotiation.
And the letter to Mexico. Similar tone, different focus.
Precisely. With Mexico, the focus is on its alleged failure to stop cartels and fentanyl trafficking. That's the primary reason given for the 30% tariff, even while acknowledging Mexico has been helping to secure the border.
But the economic demands are similar.
Very similar terms regarding manufacturing in the U.S., threat of tariff escalation if Mexico retaliates. It also mentions Mexico's own alleged tariff and non-tariff policies contributing to deficits. In both cases, the tone is imposition, not discussion, demanding immediate changes, little flexibility.
When you add up the cost of these new tariffs, the numbers must be staggering.
They really are. The existing 10% tariffs already cost U.S. businesses and consumers an extra $218 billion annually, just for imports from the top 10 countries.
And the new, higher tariffs from August 1st.
They dramatically escalate that burden. Mexico alone faces an additional $101 billion in costs, bringing its total tariff burden to $150 billion compared to pre-administration levels. China faces a total of $130 billion, Canada an extra $65 billion, Germany almost $50 billion, Japan $35 billion.
So the total additional cost for just those top 10 countries
is estimated at an astounding $620 billion annually. And remember, they represent about 2/3 of U.S. imports. If applied broadly across all imports, this figure could potentially hit between $780 billion and $900 billion per year.
That's not just a number. That's a silent tax on every American household.
Absolutely. So what does this massive additional cost mean for the overall economic outlook, especially inflation and interest rates, which affect every aspect of your financial life?
Well, this renewed trade war with these huge costs, it's expected to significantly increase prices and inflation across the U.S. economy. No way around that, it seems.
Which puts immense pressure on the Federal Reserve, right, to raise interest rates to fight that inflation.
Exactly, which directly conflicts with the administration's stated desire for lower rates for cuts.
And higher interest rates discourage borrowing, slow down investment, spending,
hindering overall U.S. economic growth. And as the U.S. economy slows, it reduces trade globally, leading to a potential global slowdown. Other economies feel the ripple effect.
Plus, retaliation from affected nations seems almost guaranteed,
which could lead to further tariff increases in a destructive cycle. Overall, this spells, quote, bad news for global trade and therefore probably the U.S. economy and the global economy for the rest of 2025 and beyond. It really feels like a scenario where everyone ultimately loses.
And these big macroeconomic shifts, the looming trade war, they're already having a noticeable impact on the everyday U.S. consumer. We saw some really interesting signs during Amazon Prime Day.
Right. Those headlines about booming spending, like that 30.3% rise in U.S. online sales, they didn't tell the whole story, did they?
Not at all. The granular details reveal significant consumer financial stress hiding beneath the surface. First off, Amazon extended Prime Day from 2 days to 4 days this year.
So the sales only rose 30% despite doubling the time.
Exactly. Suggests the extension was needed to hit that number, indicating a clear change in spending habits. Shoppers were cautious, worried about the trade war, expected tariff inflation.
They hung back.
Meaning what? They loaded items into their carts but didn't immediately buy. They were meticulously looking for the absolute best deals. Very different from times of financial strength when consumers are often more impulsive.
So it wasn't just how much they spent, but what they bought that was revealing.
Crucially, yes. The big shift was in what they bought. Instead of splurging on electronics, gadgets, luxury stuff, our sources show shoppers largely stocked up on household essentials like dish soap and paper plates.
That's a classic sign of belt-tightening, isn't it? Prioritizing staples over discretionary items.
It's a key, undeniable indicator, especially when inflation's rising and paychecks feel like they're shrinking relative to the cost of living. And the details bear this out. 2/3 of items bought cost less than $20. The average household spent only 156 standards across a sample of 50,000 households.
So Very constrained, strategic, needs-based spending, not confidence or surplus cash.
Exactly. Consumers are actively bracing for impact. Worried about inflation, shrinking purchasing power?
And the data backs up that worry.
It does. Average weekly hours for production and non-supervisory employees recently saw a massive drop-off. So even if headline job numbers look okay, actual take-home pay for many Americans is shrinking.
Historically, that combination, rising inflation fears, shrinking paychecks that often precedes recessions, right?
It does. However, there's also a counter-argument about sustained runaway inflation from these tariffs.
Oh,
Well, despite fears the tariffs will cause prolonged high inflation, historical data like from the dot-com bubble in the 2000s or the 2008 oil shock suggests something else. When paychecks shrink relative to prices and consumers have to cut discretionary spending, inflation tends to be transitory. It eventually falls.
because demand drops off, the market self-corrects.
Essentially, yes. Demand diminishes, which brings prices and eventually interest rates down with it.
So if consumers are pulling back, prioritizing essentials, what's happening with businesses and all their inventory?
It creates an inventory glut across the economy. Manufacturers, wholesalers, retailers, they're desperate to move stock. That's why we're seeing deep deals continue even after Prime Day.
And inventory levels are high, partly because businesses tried to get ahead of the tariffs.
Exactly. They were front-running the tariffs, rushing imports before the higher taxes kicked in. Now, consumer demand is falling due to shrinking paychecks, so this excess inventory has to be drawn down.
Impacting the whole supply chain.
The entire chain. Manufacturing slows, potential job losses, trade, transportation, warehousing, all feel it. This air pocket in the economy ultimately stems from U.S. consumers running out of discretionary cash, worrying about jobs, and changing spending habits. It's a powerful disinflationary force that could quickly lead to a broader slowdown.
Speaking of market predictions, JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon made a bold call on interest rates recently. But your analysis of consumer behavior seems to point the other way.
That's right. Diamond predicts markets are underpricing the risk of higher U.S. interest rates. He cites tariffs, migration policies, the deficit, trade restructuring as inflationary factors. He puts the chance of more rate hikes at 40–50%, much higher than the market's 20% consensus.
But what does historical data suggest?
A counter-analysis, looking at long-term history, shows 6-month Treasury bill yields. They're usually a good predictor of the Fed's benchmark rate, tend to decline ahead of drops in the consumer price index in economic slowdowns.
And what are T-bill yields doing now?
Current T-bill yields show absolutely no indication of higher rates coming. So the consumer behavior we're seeing, cutting discretionary spending, focusing on staples, strongly signals that growth and inflation expectations are going down.
Meaning interest rates will likely fall, not rise.
That's what the consumer data implies.
Yeah.
The next major economic risk to watch very closely isn't runaway inflation, but a significant challenge to the job market.
These economic challenges at home are mirrored by complex geopolitical shifts abroad, especially in key alliances. This is where it gets really interesting. Let's pivot to global conflict dynamics and alliance strains, starting with the volatile situation in Iran.
It's deeply concerning. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, they've been officially booted out of Iran. That's not just procedural. It has huge implications for global security.
Booted out. That's a massive step. It means no independent eyes on their nuclear facilities, no external verification.
Precisely that. No independent inspections by any third parties in contact with the West.
Yeah.
And crucially, the fate of Iran's enriched uranium. It's now completely unknown.
We don't know where it is or how much there is.
There's a growing consensus it remains in Iranian possession, not secured. Its location, quantity unverifiable. Furthermore, Iran has shown they can quickly recreate their centrifuges. Based on current intelligence, it's considered more likely than not they're resuming enrichment soon, maybe beyond previous levels. This loss of transparency is a major red flag for non-proliferation efforts.
This lack of transparency, their actions, it points to a hardening stance within Iran itself. How's their leadership reacting?
It really appears the hardliners are decisively winning out in the internal power struggle. President Pezeshkian described sometimes as amiable, wanting peace. He seems not in tune with the current mood.
How so?
Social media responses to our recent interview were overwhelmingly critical, suggesting he was seen as way too accommodating to the West. The hardliners firmly believe negotiating with the U.S. is straightforwardly dangerous. They see any concessions as weakness.
And Foreign Minister Arachi.
a much more experienced, influential figure. He's now repeatedly demanding cast-iron guarantees from the U.S. against attacks during negotiations, referencing the 12-day war where Iran was attacked while talks were supposedly happening.
Cast iron guarantees, is that even possible for the U.S. to give?
Deemed impossible. Intense domestic political opposition in the U.S., plus a complete lack of credibility after past actions. It creates an insurmountable diplomatic barrier.
So diplomacy stalled, transparency gone. The U.S. faces a huge dilemma. War or no war? The pressure must be building.
It's creating overwhelming pressure. The lack of nuclear transparency, the diplomatic breakdown, it's forcing the U.S. to seriously consider another military attack on Iran.
How soon could that decision point come?
Maybe as soon as autumn. Especially if those unconfirmed reports are true that Iran is actively importing advanced air defense systems from China.
And the military positioning reflects this tension.
It does. 2 U.S. carrier groups, other substantial forces, they remain strategically positioned in the Middle East. It signifies a trigger-ready situation. Both Iran and Israel are actively rearming, modernizing.
But isn't there a narrative problem for the U.S. administration? Didn't the former president claim victory already?
A significant problem. He publicly claimed everything has been obliterated in Iran, hailing the previous military operation as the greatest military victory in all of history. That narrative creates a real political box.
So if that narrative clashes with reality, how might they square the circle? Adapt the public explanation.
The predicted narrative shift, according to our sources, will be to assert that the only way to prevent Iran acquiring nuclear weapons is through regime change.
Regime change, drawing parallels to Iraq.
Exactly. Parallels to the Saddam Hussein narrative before the Iraq War. Framing military action as necessary for national security, not just about proliferation.
And that previous conflict, the 12-day war, what was its real aim?
Sources indicate it was clearly an attempt to decapitate the entire Iranian system, targeting generals, attempting to kill Khamenei, even civilian leaders like Pezeshkian. Critically, our sources say it failed in that objective.
So if there's another conflict, it won't be a quick strike, given those failures.
No, almost certainly not. Iran will undoubtedly take extensive precautions, making a second attempt at decapitation highly unlikely to succeed.
And ground forces are off the table.
Simply not a viable option for the U.S. Immense scale, complexity. Instead, a prolonged conflict is projected. Missiles and bombing raids lasting years potentially, with intermittent ceasefires, resurgences.
What would be the consequences of such a war?
It would drain immense U.S. resources, put increasing unsustainable pressure on Israel. It would be incredibly difficult for Iran, of course, but it's a large country, vast population that can absorb protracted conflict.
And Iran's allies would likely step up.
Expected to increase support, potentially expanding the conflict. The broader impact. Significant immediate concern for global oil prices may be a new energy shock, major disruption to trade through the Straits of Hormuz, cascading effects on the global economy. It's a deeply concerning path.
And to think this whole nuclear problem should never have risen at all, considering the diplomatic options once available.
Exactly. The JCPOA agreement, Iran limiting enrichment to 3%, unlimited time it was easily achievable. It had effectively constrained their program. The previous administration's peace through strength approach ultimately led to this current precarious predicament. Abandoning a workable diplomatic solution set the stage for renewed proliferation and potential conflict.
This volatility isn't just in the Middle East. Shifting to the Indo-Pacific, the U.S.-Japan alliance, a security cornerstone for decades, seems to be fracturing. That canceled meeting is a serious sign.
It absolutely is. Japan abruptly canceled that crucial 2+2 security meeting with the U.S., scheduled for July 1st. That's far more than just diplomatic formality.
Yeah.
It's a serious warning sign of a deep rift forming. Trust between these long-standing allies appears to be fading fast.
Why are those 2+2 meetings so important?
They involve the foreign and defense ministers from both countries. They're vital for aligning critical military plans, coordinating joint exercises, missile defense, emergency response scenarios. Canceling weakens real operational readiness, sends a chilling signal regionally.
So what's driving this unexpected strain? Is it mainly domestic pressure on Japan's leadership?
It's a combination, but domestic pressure on Prime Minister Ishiba is intense, especially with crucial July 20th elections looming. His government reportedly feels angry and humiliated by recent U.S. administration demands.
What demands specifically?
Japan must significantly increase military spending from 3% to a staggering 3.5% of GDP. It's a massive amount, requiring unprecedented budget shifts, plus massive new tariffs 25% on Japanese cars, 24% on other goods. And the U.S. unilaterally canceled the 2018 trade deal.
That sounds punitive. How does Tokyo view these demands?
As a blunt order, not an invitation to discuss, a profound betrayal of the alliance. It's politically risky for Japanese officials to seem too close to the current U.S. team. It could cost them the election. Voices in Japan are openly questioning U.S. reliability.
This sounds like it could have devastating strategic consequences for the whole U.S. defense setup in the Pacific.
It could indeed collapse the entire U.S. defense architecture in the Pacific region. This alliance, solid since WWII, is now truly teetering on the edge.
Right.
China, North Korea, they're watching this with immense interest. Any perceived weakness is an opportunity for them.
And a controversial figure contributing to this seems to be Elbridge Colby. What's his influence here, especially regarding alliances like AUKUS?
Colby, holding the #3 spot in the Pentagon, is a vocal critic of America's traditional alliance system, advocate to an America First doctrine. He's publicly questioned the future of AUKUS, the U.S., UK, Australia pact.
Question AUKUS. It was meant to be a cornerstone.
Exactly. Politico reports the U.S. is reviewing AUKUS specifically to fit the America First doctrine, not for strategic reasons. More concretely, Colby is reportedly challenging the planned sale of 3 Virginia-class nuclear submarines to Australia, insisting the U.S. needs them itself.
Delaying or canceling those subs, that would send a terrible message.
Sets a dangerous precedent. Suggests U.S. commitments hinge entirely on who's in the White House. This uncertainty is disastrous for allies already nervous about China's rise, undermines trust, long-term planning.
And that demand for Japan to raise defense spending to 3.5% that came from this same perspective must have felt like an insult in Tokyo.
It certainly did. Felt like a complete betrayal. Presented as no discussion, no dialogue, just a blunt directive. Japan now feels its voice doesn't matter, treated like a junior partner, not an equal ally.
So Colby's pressure on Japan and Australia points to a potential fracture of the entire U.S. defense structure in the Pacific.
That's the concern. A fundamental challenge to the post-WWII security architecture, risking decades of carefully built alliances for an America First reorientation.
What are the broader geopolitical ramifications if this alliance truly weakens? If the U.S. seems to be losing control of key partners?
The implications are dire. Beijing, Pyongyang, Moscow might see it as an opening for more aggressive moves. If Japan's ruling party loses the election due to this perceived betrayal, a new leader might distance Japan from the U.S., seek deals with China or South Korea.
And in a real crisis.
The breakdown in communication, trust, could lead to confusion, critically delayed responses. If China thinks the U.S. is losing control, it may decide to go all in on its ambitions. Taiwan, disputed islands. If Tokyo feels insecure about U.S. backing, it might lack confidence to respond effectively.
So China sees this as a strategic opportunity and isn't wasting time.
Absolutely. Beijing is wasting no time exploiting this perceived weakening. After the U.S. imposed harsh tariffs on Japan, China actively moved to fill the vacuum.
How?
Chinese officials held closed-door talks with trade delegations from Japan and South Korea. Sources indicate major Japanese companies are already actively exploring Chinese alternatives for suppliers' export routes.
What is Beijing offering them?
What Washington no longer consistently provides: lower tariffs, long-term infrastructure investments, even partial access to China's huge domestic market for Japanese automakers. They've even proposed maritime coordination, joint port projects in Southeast Asia, trying to draw Japan into their economic orbit.
So the strategy is to weaken the U.S.-Japan alliance through economic dependency.
That seems to be the explicit aim. Japan, increasingly wary of trade aggression and unpredictability from Washington, is clearly hedging its bets, ready for alternatives if the U.S. continues with chaotic foreign policy and disruptive tariffs. It's a calculated move by Beijing to redraw the Indo-Pacific map.
So what does all this mean for the future? The threads of global economics, trade, alliances are so intertwined, creating a complex, uncertain, incredibly challenging landscape, especially for the United States. Which brings us to a crucial discussion about statesmanship and leadership in 2025.
This is such a fundamental question right now. At that recent 2025 Claremont Statesmanship Award event, where J.D. Vance was honored, the conversation really tried to define true statesmanship today.
What was the core idea?
The perspective presented emphasized knowing your telos, your ultimate destination or purpose. Using the former president's approach to Iran as an example, it was described as having a clear aim: American revitalization, avoiding quagmires, no nuclear weapons for Iran, rather than just aimless action.
So purpose-driven. What else defines a statesman according to this view?
Embodying both prudence, practical judgment, and moral courage. identifying core national problems, addressing them with precision rhetorically, and being unafraid to challenge party dogma if it doesn't benefit the nation.
And a key achievement is shifting the Overton window. Can you explain that?
Exactly. Moving the Overton window means shifting what's considered unthinkable or outside acceptable discourse to become mainstream public policy.
Like the example they used.
The former president's decade-long push for a border wall and mass deportations. Once seen as radical, now, according to this view, mainstream. This required relentless emphasis, dedication, building popular consensus, confronting opposing views head-on.
So statesmen challenged the status quo, like the three-legged stool of neoliberalism.
That's the phrase used. Challenging endless war, invite the world, and import a bunch of plastic. Advocating for a more nationalist, self-interested approach.
It also comes down to motivation, right? Nation versus self.
Absolutely. The core motivation must be the nation or country, its long-term flourishing, contrasting sharply with politicians whose ultimate cause is often self-notoriety, popularity, power, prestige, leading to self-serving decisions.
They drew on historical examples.
Figures like the Founding Fathers were described as having harnessed their ambition to do great things for the sake of the country, a detachment from the immediate, an elevation of the transcendent, prioritizing a greater ideal over personal gain.
This perspective also mentioned a perceived brain drain from politics.
Yes. Arguing society's best and brightest moved away from politics towards tech. Maybe customizing apps for narcissism instead of compelling world-changing projects like the Manhattan Project.
But is there hope for a reversal?
A significant note of hope was expressed. A new generation of high IQ, high-driven, virtuous people are now reportedly forsaking higher wealth and business to pursue statesmanship, valuing sacrifice, a transcendent ideal, over immediate satisfaction. Reminiscent of the World War II generation, suggests potential renewal of leadership driven by purpose.
So for voters trying to choose leaders now, what should they look for based on these principles?
It was emphasized voters should learn to differentiate shallow from deep officials. Deep individuals, like the former president and J.D. Vance were cited as examples, are seen as those who think about profound issues, willing to challenge pre-existing dogmas.
And political will is crucial.
Absolutely crucial. Argued that almost every major problem facing America is a failure or a success of the will. Citing the border situation under the current administration or high crime rates, the fundamental question posed, do we have a will to our nation? A collective resolve.
And J.D. Vance is presented as a contemporary model of this.
He is highlighted as a deep thinker who understands complex issues, philosophical concepts, and their real-life implications. Praised for constantly courting other people's opinions and never forgetting his roots in rural Ohio, Appalachia.
Which informs his politics.
Fundamentally. His stance against unnecessary wars, for restrictive immigration, better trade policies, his phenomenal moral courage was also highlighted, like challenging Germany at NATO, going against norms.
And the Claremont Institute's role.
Described as the intellectual home of the new right. Fostering this thinking, emphasizing a return to good government principles, a 20-year focus on dismantling the administrative state to restore what they see as constitutional governance, viewing leaders like Vance as vital for tackling deep-seated challenges.
From statesmanship challenges in the U.S., let's pivot to a stark warning about governance from the U.K. Their legal system sounds like it's in a complete mess.
That's putting it mildly. Barrister Stephen Barrett, speaking at a New Culture Forum event, gave a blistering assessment. Described the UK legal system as fundamentally broken, the civil service not fit for purpose.
He even expressed sympathy for the leaders.
Yes, sympathy for PM Keir Starmer and former PM Rishi Sunak. Views them as frontmen who expected the civil service to just run things smoothly, but now they're struggling as the system itself collapses around them, unable to perform basic functions.
He used that striking analogy about legal fat.
He did. Compared printing money causing inflation to printing more laws, crashing an economy. Argued that over the last 20-25 years, the UK legal system became unimaginably fat, bloated with excessive, often contradictory legislation.
With the consequence that
Most people, including police officers on the beat, cannot understand the law anymore. This profound doubt leads directly to inaction, like the police uncertainty around just stop oil protesters.
And civil servants are paralyzed by fear.
Operating with an out-of-whack relationship to fear, actively avoiding action if there's even a tiny risk of illegality, leading to systemic paralysis. He argues the law is metastasizing, breaking down, failing to provide clear boundaries, allowing bad people to operate unchecked.
And a prime example was the Communications Act 2003 and Ofcom.
Exactly. The BBC, once admired, now soon is metastasizing due to the word garbage of that 2003 act. Thousands of words, long, confusing, delegating definitions of key rules like impartiality to secondary bodies like Ofcom, instead of defining them clearly in law.
He couldn't find a definition himself.
Spent 3.5 hours trying to find a simple definition of impartiality. Stress that shouldn't be necessary for a qualified lawyer. Ofcom, he noted, changed it to due impartiality, which he scathingly interprets as impartial unless we say it isn't. A profound lack of clear rules.
And Ofcom got fined for attacking GB News.
Fined £4.6 million paid by taxpayers, highlighting what he calls a bloated, flabby system that doesn't work and actively harms the public.
So what's the solution? He calls for the Great Restoration.
Argues forcefully the system must be fixed urgently. Requires a radical approach, defining clear, unambiguous boundaries so wrongdoing can be addressed definitively. Nope, you're wrong, off to prison. Believes that clarity is essential for society to function.
He pushed back on using shame like racist as a control.
Strongly. Argued such tactics only worked on the least racist people. Said the focus must be a safe, simple system for everyone, including police from diverse communities who need clear rules.
His summary of the rule of law was simple.
Profoundly simple. Clear rules, known in advance, enforced equally without fear or favor. Just 11 words. This, he states, demands open-heart surgery on the legal system, to cut lurds, remove the flab lawyers built careers on. The goal, a legal system every non-lawyer should be able to understand, restoring clarity, accountability, justice.
What an incredible deep dive we've had today. From China's complex economic shifts and scientific ambitions to the challenging new U.S. trade landscape, the shifting global alliances, and those crucial discussions on statesmanship and governance, we've covered remarkable ground.
Indeed. As your AI guides, we really strive to provide you with daily, intriguing updates on current events, helping you cut through the noise, gain that deeper understanding of the world around you. We hope this journey to discovery continues with us.
And as you reflect on these intricate global dynamics, maybe ask yourself this. In an increasingly interconnected world where economic decisions ripple across continents and geopolitical alliances are constantly tested, how might understanding the true motivations behind these global shifts equip you to better navigate your own future?
If you found this deep dive insightful, valuable, please consider supporting us. Liking, subscribing, maybe even donating on our GoFundMe page helps ensure our continued explorations. Thank you for joining us.